Yeah, what's good, world? It's your boy, SK74 official, back with another reaction. As you see, it said the federal government wants Larry Hoover to die in prison because of this. I don't know what for. I wonder how can I look up his case. I still ain't figured that part out. But anyway, without further ado, let's start.
Is not associated with a gang and hasn't been for many, many decades.
Larry Hoover, through his lawyers, seeking early release from multiple life sentences, a special program passed by Congress known as the First Step Act.
Gang kingpin Larry Hoover is making a long shot bid for his release. He's 73 years old now.
Why would Jay Prince, in the name of Larry Hoover, go to social media and insinuate in any way that it's on? It could be smoke. Why would he sit his son, Larry Hoover Jr., on the side of him, even when he's having these type of discussions? He should have said, in the name of Rap-A-Lot, and by any and all means, you protect that man's name. You keep anything that has anything to do with violence, a threat, or an act of any of these things that they have used against him for 49 years, you keep that away from his name at all costs.
Why are landlords using these strange...
I'm trying to see what they mean, these commercials.
Despite the general consensus, the fact still remains that former gang leader Larry Hoover, the now old man, was already serving a 200-year state sentence for the murder of a rival when he was indicted in federal court in 1995 on charges he continued to oversee a murderous drug gang's reign.
Damn, that's over 30 years ago. I just hit the trade fire this year. You feel me? That's 30 years. God damn.
Terror from prison.
Killer, the convicted Chicago street gang racketeer Larry Hoover, who is currently serving multiple life sentences. Even at age 71, law enforcement officials say Hoover is considered the capo of the gangster disciples. Larry Hoover, considered by authorities to be Chicago's most powerful and bloodthirsty living gangster. Hoover now serving 6 life sentences here at the Supermax prison in Colorado for his role as the murderous chairman of Chicago's ruthless gangster disciples.
Larry Hoover was the undisputed leader of the largest monolithic gang in the nation.
Ron Safer, former assistant U.S. attorney in Chicago, who convicted him in 1997 of murder, conspiracy, extortion, and money laundering. Hoover's gang was doing $100 million a year in illicit business, and Safer says killing hundreds of people along the way.
That was the driving force behind the largest murder total that the city of Chicago has ever known. The majority of those tied to the gangster disciples.
He was convicted on 40 criminal counts in 1997 when a judge...
I believe that's a lie. And on the reason why, because a lot of this shit started because someone else, y'all just want to throw it all on him because he had a movement going on. You know what I'm saying? People listening to him, respecting him, moving the way he needs them to without problems. But it's always somebody trying to inject issues into what you're doing.
Sentenced him to the mandatory term of life in prison that he was serving.
In prison, he is still viewed by police as the leader of the state's largest and most dangerous street gang. Joni Lum is here with the latest on today's raid. Joni?
Sonia and Dave, authorities believe Larry Hoover is running an enormous gang operation from inside the Dixon Correctional Center where he is housed. Chicago, Illinois, and IRS agents carried out a federal warrant at the offices of Save the Children Promotions, looking for evidence of income tax evasion and money laundering. The 44-year-old acknowledged leader of the Black Gangster Disciples has been in prison since 1973 for a drug-related murder. At several parole hearings, he's claimed he's a changed man who is no longer violent. Today, police spent about 2 hours combing through the records of Save the Children on the South Side. They seized half a dozen cardboard boxes and file cabinets of financial records and also $7,000 in cash. Police say the charity organization has legitimate operations, but they also believe it is a front for an effort to get Hoover out of jail. Police believe that Hoover has been running drug trafficking in the city of Chicago from his jail cell, and that potential tax law violations may be a way to dismantle the gang. Police also went to the home of Hoover's wife, Wendy Jenkins, where they also just took some records.
And they haven't said yet exactly what they found in those records, or?
They found records with some amounts, but they did not find any drugs.
Larry Hoover's December.
So basically, they just want to announce, they just want to prove they got evidence, but they don't want to show it. Like, that's not really giving us a real story. You just basically fucking people over just because you say you got evidence, but she didn't give no clear evident notice on certain specifics.
73 murder conviction still rings bells to many. It was for this conviction that Larry Hoover was to serve 150 to 200 years in state prison. The conviction would, however, allegedly not stop Larry Hoover from running the gang.
Hoover is arrested and charged with murder, and although he never pulled the trigger, Hoover is found guilty and sentenced to 150 to 200 years. 23 years old, in Statesville maximum security.
The late U.S. District Judge Harry Leinweber handed Larry Hoover his life sentence in 1998 following his conviction for engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise. In this video, we're not going to revisit the life of Larry Hoover that has been widely overcovered on social media. Instead, we are going to focus on Larry Hoover's request for release from prison after serving decades behind bars and why the government wants him to die in prison.
The only one to die because they know he can make shit happen. Don't kill motherfuckers you know you can use. Or put them away.
Larry Hoover, the 73-year-old co-founder of the Chicago street gang, the Gangster Disciples, made a rare public appearance on Thursday, September the 26th of 2024. He addressed a district judge via video conference. Larry Hoover, who has been serving a life sentence for murder since the 1970s, then another life sentence for running a criminal enterprise from prison since the 90s, is seeking a new chance at freedom through a resentencing request under the First Step Act, a 2018 law signed by then President Donald Trump that allows certain sentencing reforms to be applied retroactively.
In the midst of divisiveness and absolute chaos in Washington, something is actually getting done on Capitol Hill, a very good thing. One of the biggest, in my opinion, one of the biggest reforms in decades has just passed the Senate.
In my opinion, too, it's called the First Step Act. It's a sweeping bipartisan bill that overhauls parts of the federal criminal justice system. Supporters say it'll make the system fairer, it'll reduce prison overcrowding, and it'll save taxpayer money. Let's talk about what it does specifically. It takes several steps to ease mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug offenders. It reduces the 3-strike penalty from life behind bars to 25 years. It helps inmates earn reduced sentences for good behavior, and it provides programs to help reduce recidivism, or a repeat of the crimes that got prisoners into prison in the first place. But the bill only affects federal prisons. This is important. There are nearly 81,000 inmates right now. That is less than.
That's a high ass number. Now the fact that it's a lot that's not gonna help them. It's a lot of shit that's gonna be stopping them from one subject because something they did or something that the motherfuckers didn't accept. I don't know. But one of the two, that number not gonna drop.
10% of America's prison population. That's why this is just a first step.
Larry Hoover's legal team argues that evolving views on lengthy prison terms warrant reconsideration of his life sentence, which he is serving at the Supermax prison, ADX, in Florence, Colorado. Lawyers representing Larry Hoover filed a motion asking the judge overseeing his request for release from a life sentence due to his vaguely intimidating and entirely inappropriate comments at a hearing the week prior. The request focuses on U.S. District Judge John Robert Blakely's unusual line of questioning of defense counsel about other murders Hoover may have committed, as well as an offbeat moment when the judge cut off an argument by lead attorney saying it sounded like she was rapping. The 13-page motion accused Blakely of showing actual bias toward Larry Hoover by siding with a prosecution argument that he is responsible for more violence than his crimes of conviction suggest, even though he's been locked away.
As long as he ain't got at least 10 people behind him, I don't see this man getting up. That's a shitty ass thought, but it seems like it's more people willing to keep his ass in there to let him out. Because it seems to be the stigma that he back in the day was big. I mean, yeah, he was. I'm not saying he wasn't. But they feel like, oh, he's been in all that time, he's not changed. But that man been in that damn all his life. Let that motherfucker free.
In a supermax prison for decades. The recusal request comes as Blakely, a former Cook County and federal prosecutor who was appointed to the federal bench in 2014, is overseeing another high-profile case, the blockbuster racketeering trial of former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan.
Alan, there are 6 words in the indictment that seem to summarize more than a decade of alleged corruption by House Speaker Mike Madigan. "Just leave it in my hands," Madigan is quoted as saying, apparently on a secret recording. But when he offered to solve problems and take care of something on one hand, investigators tonight suggest that left his other hand open. They say for bribes and private benefits.
The indictment accuses Madigan of leading, for nearly a decade, a criminal enterprise whose purpose was to enhance Madigan's political power and financial well-being while also generating income for his political allies and associates.
The Madigan Enterprise, according to federal prosecutors, is a criminal conspiracy with former Illinois House Speaker Mike Madigan at the top of the flowchart. Enterprise is legal lingo more commonly heard in connection with the outfit or a drug cartel. But at the heart of these 22 counts against Madigan are crooked politics, say prosecutors, racketeering, bribery, extortion, and fraud, not typical political campaign slogans.
It also marks another twist in Larry Hoover's years-long quest to win early release under the First Step Act passed in 2018, which has already led to reduced sentences for several of his co-defendants. Federal prosecutors have opposed such a break for Larry Hoover, arguing he had untold damage to communities across Chicago during his reign on the streets. They argued that Larry Hoover has continued to hold sway over the gang's hierarchy while in prison.
That's a good question. Is it more people behind the law books that's holding them in? Or do they have help from the street, from different people sending in probably notes and shit? You know what I'm saying? Explaining different bullshit just to keep them there. That's a great ass question.
Even promoting an underling he'd secretly communicated with through coded messages hidden in a dictionary. Larry Hoover's attorneys meanwhile argued that decades behind bars have left him a changed man, and that the prosecutors have unfairly painted him as a puppet master to try to keep him locked up.
While we recognize the seriousness of the offenses for which he's convicted, we believe that there's been evolving attitudes about excessively harsh sentences, and that life in prison at ADX is basically just being buried alive.
Near the end of the hour-long hearing, Blakely delved into the prosecution's argument. Larry Hoover decimated and destroyed tens of thousands of lives with violence, addiction, and murder. In her argument, she requested an evidentiary hearing over the government's allegations that Larry Hoover continues to be a shot caller, saying his blueprint comment was an innocent question about a document that isn't about gangs at all, and that the so-called coded dictionary has never been produced by prosecutors.
Well, I have an old man sitting in the ADX with terrorists.
New tonight, we hear from the son of former gang leader Larry Hoover as 2 rap superstars look to keep a spotlight on his father's case.
We're talking about Kanye and Drake, who recently announced plans for a...
But why Drake? Always doing something weird. This don't even seem like his subject. What the fuck is he doing? I mean, I get Kanye. They're from the same way. But what the fuck is Drake point? I think at this point, he just want to stay irrelevant in the weirdest ways. I ain't hating on the man. He got his bread. Do your shit. He be on a random weird shit. Like, this ain't weird to me necessarily, But what do he have to do with it? I'm confused.
But there is pushback tonight from the former prosecutor who helped to convict Larry Hoover of murder. And Tia Ewing is live with more on this. Tia.
Dude, the technology in this thing is...
Come on, man. Finish this.
Well, Larry Hoover is known on Chicago streets to this day as King Larry for inflicting several decades of violence. But his son says despite his father's heinous past, he deserves to be let free from prison. This is the Instagram post from music artist and business mogul Kanye West. He's putting on a benefit concert with performer Drake to bring awareness to Larry Hoover Sr. In 2018, Kanye visited then President Donald Trump, hoping he let the notorious leader of the gangster disciples out of prison.
He's a beacon for us that needs to see his family, that needs to go out and represent.
The 71-year-old is serving out 6 consecutive life sentences for murder in 1973, then sentenced again while behind bars after a 17-year-long investigation for running a criminal enterprise.
What do you say to those people that say, no, he's exactly where he deserves to be?
He's a 71-year-old man.
They on bullshit, and they don't want to see a motherfucker change, but anyway.
And 2, the law states that he should be released. Like if we live in this American society and we want the law to work for us, it should work for him also.
In July of this year, Hoover tried to get released from prison as part of a sentencing break under a law signed by former President Trump. The First Step Act allows prisoners to seek reductions in their sentences. The act allowed co-defendants of Hoover's to walk free. Attorney Ron Safer was lead prosecutor on the case in the 90s. He says justice was done and Hoover should not be granted clemency.
Larry Hoover was operating a huge crime syndicate, an organization that sold in excess of $100 million a year in.
So you're more mad that he was able to do a lot more shit in the street than behind paperwork, signatures of contracts and random bullshit that was gonna stop his move. It's not really about what the fuck he did, it's what the fuck they couldn't get him to do for them, if you ask me. But that's my opinion.
Drugs in the Chicago area alone. It had tentacles in 28 states, 30,000 plus members.
Hoover's son says that he hopes the free benefit concert in L.A. on December 9th brings awareness to his father's case. Live tonight, Tia Ewing, Fox 32 Chicago.
Roughly a quarter century later, another door has swung shut on Larry Hoover, at least for now. A U.S. district judge denied the bid from Larry Hoover for a sentencing break under the First Step Act. In a long-awaited 19-page order, the judge referred to the 70-plus-year-old Larry Hoover as one of the most notorious criminals in Illinois' history, also writing that although Larry Hoover's life sentence at the federal Supermax prison in Colorado is particularly grim, he's concerned about an active risk of harm if Hoover were ultimately freed. The judge issued this order without prejudice, meaning Larry Hoover has an opportunity to try again. The ruling landed almost a year to the day after the U.S. attorney made a rare personal plea, asking the judge during a hearing not to resentence Larry Hoover, saying it would be a miscarriage of justice to reduce Larry Hoover's sentence in any way, shape, form, or fashion. One possible.
At this point, fuck the reduce, because he been in that since what, the 70s, you say? They recharged him back in the 90s. At this point, that man that did this shit. Like, that motherfucker out.
Way for Larry Hoover to be released from prison is to get clemency from both the federal government, specifically from the President of the United States and the state government of Illinois, involving the governor. Larry Hoover can also be released from prison for his federal crimes on compassionate grounds and get home confinement under the First Step Act provision for the elderly inmates. Under the First Step Act, he can also be released in case of terminal illness. Another possible way for him is to get his drug-related sentences commuted under the First Step Act. Larry Hoover has already made 2 appeals under the act. His first
Damn.
appeal was turned down by the judge in July of 2021. Larry Hoover made a second appeal in July of 2022, but the judge took no action for almost 2 years and later died on June the 11th of 2024. U.S. District Judge.
So that man tried to free himself twice. And the judge died before he even get the chance to do his third. So I'm wondering, like, do they pass this to the next person in power that's coming, or do they just sit that shit to the side, wait till they find somebody they want to work on that shit? Because I'm confused at this point.
Blakely took up Larry Hoover's appeal, and court hearings are currently underway. If, in fact, he is released on his federal charges, we'll still have to get relief in the murder sentence from the governor or the Prisoner Review Board of Illinois.
I think it could be a high probability that Larry Hoover could be granted a compassionate release. And just to give you a little bit of insight on what he got going on, it's been back in the news anyway, but the judge wants Larry Hoover to come all the way back to court to be able to be there face-to-face in the courtroom and open court for his compassionate release. They recently had it all in the news, national news, the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun, Washington Post, New York Times. Everybody is talking about it. You know, he's one of the biggest, most notorious guys that got a sentence out there amongst people that's supposed to be just, I'm going to say, homegrown domestic criminals.
Liberty. Oh, man. They ain't gonna never let them out. And if they do, there's gonna be real big restrictions. But anywho, my final on this, that man ain't been in there long enough. A lot of shit going on ain't because of his hand. He just happened to be the start of this shit. That's why they making an example of him. But I think the times is a little bit different.